The Eastern Front, winter 1942. The temperature is 35 degrees below zero. In a frozen trench outside Stalingrad, a German infantryman named Hans writes a letter to his wife in Munich. He writes about the cold. He writes about the lack of food, but mostly he writes about the night. For the German Sixth Army, the night is no longer a time to sleep. It is a time to hide. Hans writes, "We cannot light a cigarette. We cannot speak above a whisper. If we show a light, they will see us. If we sleep, we might never wake up. They are ghosts. They have no motors. They have no souls." Listen. Can you hear it? Can you hear this sound? Swish, swish, swish. That isn't the wind. That is the sound of wood and canvas gliding over the trenches at 60 miles per hour. It is the sound that drove the most disciplined army in the world into a state of mass psychosis. They strike without warning. There is no siren because their engines are turned off. They drop their bombs by hand, leaning out of open cockpits in freezing winds, and by the time the explosions hit the ground, the planes are already gone, vanishing into the black void like smoke. The Germans called them Nachthexen, the night witches. But the Germans made a mistake. They thought they were fighting an elite squad of Soviet super soldiers. They believed these pilots were injected with special chemicals that allowed them to see in the dark. They were wrong. They were fighting schoolgirls. They were fighting librarians. They were teenagers who had to sit on pillows because they were too short to see out of the cockpit. And they were winning. They come at night. To understand the witches, you must first understand the desperation of 1941. This was not a war of conquest, it was a war of extinction. Hitler's Operation Barbarossa had shattered the Red Army. In the first week alone, the Soviet Air Force lost 2,000 aircraft, most of them destroyed on the ground before they could even take off. The Luftwaffe ruled the sky. The panzer divisions were driving toward Moscow. Enter Marina Raskova. In Russia, Raskova was a celebrity, the Soviet Amelia Earhart. She held world records for long-distance flights. She was a national icon. But she was also angry. Her office in Moscow was flooded with letters, sacks of mail arriving every day. Not fan mail, but hate mail. Not hate for her, hate for the Germans. Thousands of Soviet women, girls who'd lost brothers, fathers, and husbands were writing to Raskova with a simple demand. Don't tell us to roll bandages. Give us rifles. Give us planes. Raskova took a gamble that could have had her executed. She went directly to Joseph Stalin. She argued that Soviet women were untapped resources. She argued that in a war of annihilation, gender roles didn't matter. Stalin, a man not known for his progressive views on women, looked at the maps. He looked at the burning cities. He realized he had no choice. On October 8, 1941, he signed Order 0099, the formation of 3 all-female air regiments. It was historic. It was unprecedented. And it was a logistical nightmare. They came from everywhere. Moscow University students, factory workers from the Urals, high schoolers who lied about their age. Some were as young as 17. They boarded trains heading east to the town of Engels. They thought they were going to be fighter aces. They thought they would be given sleek metal Yak-1 fighters with heavy cannons. They spent the train ride talking about glory. They had no idea that they were being sent to a place that would break them before they ever saw a German. Engels Aviation School, October 1941. The welcome was brutal. The male commanders looked at these thousands of young women in skirts and heels and scoffed. "This is not a sorority. This is war." The first order of business? Strip away the femininity. The great haircut. It sounds trivial, but for many of these women, their braids were their pride. They were sheared off. Then came the uniforms. There were no female sizes in the Red Army supply chain. The women were issued men's tunics that hung to their knees. They were given size 42 boots for size 36 feet. They had to tear up their own bedding and wrap the rags around their feet just to keep the boots from falling off. They walked like clowns. The men laughed. But the laughter stopped when the training began. Standard pilot training takes 2 years. Raskova was told she had 6 months. The schedule was inhuman. Wake up at 5 a.m., study navigation, ballistics, and mechanics until 8 p.m., marching drills in the snow until midnight, sleep for 4 hours, repeat. They flew blindfolded to simulate night. They memorized maps until they could draw them in the dirt with a stick. They ceased to be girls. They became instruments of navigation. Anyone who complained was washed out. Anyone who cried was washed out. And then, the unveiling of their weapon. The women were marched to the hangar. They expected steel monsters. Instead, they saw the Polikarpov PO-2, the kukuruznik, the corn duster, a biplane made of plywood and canvas. It was designed in 1928 to spray pesticides on crops. It had an open cockpit, it had no radio, it had no armor plating. You could punch a hole through the side of the fuselage with a screwdriver. A single bullet from a German rifle, not even an anti-aircraft gun, just a standard rifle, could shatter the wooden spars and tear the wing off. The women looked at Raskova. Was this a joke? "This is your coffin," the male instructors whispered. But Raskova didn't flinch. She told them the truth. "It is slow, it is old, but it is all we have. And if you are good enough, it is invisible." Let's analyze why this plane was considered a death trap. The PO-2 had a top speed of 94 miles per hour. A modern German Messerschmitt 109 could fly at 400 miles per hour. In an air war, speed is life. If you are slow, you die. The PO-2 was so slow that it was faster to drive a Mercedes on the Autobahn. But the pilots weren't the only heroes. Let's talk about the mechanics, also women. The conditions on the Eastern Front were apocalyptic. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. At that temperature, metal sticks to skin. If you touch a wrench with your bare hand, it rips the skin off when you pull away. The mechanics worked outside, in the snow, day and night. The oil in the engines would freeze solid. To start the planes, the women had to heat water over fires, pour it into the radiator to warm the block, crank the propeller by hand, and then drain the oil immediately after landing so it wouldn't freeze again. They slept in holes dug in the ground under the wings. And the bombs? The PO-2 wasn't built to carry bombs, so they jerry-rigged it. They attached rudimentary racks under the wings. Sometimes the release mechanism jammed. Imagine this. You are flying over a burning German city. The anti-aircraft fire is exploding all around you. You pull the lever to drop the bomb, and it hangs. It's stuck. If you land with a live bomb on the wing, the impact will blow you up. So, the navigator had to unbuckle her harness. She had to climb out of the cockpit in midair. She had to crawl along the slippery, icy wooden wing, holding onto the struts with one hand, fighting 90-mile-per-hour winds. She would kick the bomb loose with her boot, and then crawl back in. This wasn't an isolated incident. This happened weekly. May 1942. The 588th Regiment arrived at the front lines. The male regiments nearby greeted them with mockery. They called them the Powder Puff Squad. But on June 8th, the laughing stopped. Regiment Commander Yevdokia Bershanskaya led the first raid. 3 planes. Target, German headquarters in the southern steppe. It was here, in the crucible of combat, that they discovered the tactic that would make them famous: the idle glide. As they approached the target, the German listening posts were straining to hear engines. So, 5 miles out, Bershanskaya cut the ignition. The propeller slowed to a halt. The plane became a glider. The silence was absolute. They drifted over the German trenches like falling leaves. The German sentries below were smoking cigarettes, looking at the stars, listening for the roar of bombers. They heard nothing. Until, click, click, the sound of the bomb racks releasing. By the time the Germans realized they were under attack, the bombs had detonated and the witches had restarted their engines and were banking away into the darkness. It was terrifyingly effective. But it came at a cost. To carry 2 bombs, the PO2 had to strip all unnecessary weight. That meant no radios, no armor, no machine guns for defense, and, most critically, no parachutes. Until 1944, the Night Witches flew without parachutes. Think about the psychology of that decision. Every pilot knew that if their plane was hit by an incendiary bullet and the PO2 burned like matchwood, they had 2 choices: burn to death in the cockpit or jump to their death. They climbed into those planes every night knowing there was no escape plan. 1943. The German army is sick of the night harassment. They cannot sleep. The 588th is bombing them every 3 minutes. How? Because the witches were flying multiple sorties. A pilot would land, reload, refuel, and take off again in 5 minutes. Some pilots, like the legendary Nadezhda Popova, flew 18 missions in a single night. The Germans had to stop them, so they brought in the heavy anti-aircraft units. They created kill zones. The searchlights were the pilot's worst nightmare. When a powerful searchlight hits a canvas plane in the dark, the pilot is instantly blinded. The cockpit glows like the inside of a light bulb. You cannot see your instruments. You cannot see the ground. And once the light catches you, the flak guns lock on. It's called being coned. If you are coned, you are dead. One night in 1943, the Germans set a trap. They let the first wave of witches fly in. They stayed silent. Then, all at once, 4 massive searchlights snapped on. It was bright as day. The anti-aircraft cannons tore the plywood planes to shreds. Those on the ground watched as 4 balls of fire tumbled slowly from the sky. There were no parachutes. 8 women died in 60 seconds. The regiment was devastated, but they didn't cry. They wanted revenge. They developed a new suicidal tactic. They flew in pairs. The first plane would fly straight into the searchlights, intentionally drawing the fire, acting as live bait. While the German gunners were distracted trying to kill the bait, the second plane would glide in from the side, silently, and drop bombs directly onto the searchlights. It required nerves of steel. You had to volunteer to be the target. And every night, hands went up. I'll do it. Let me be the bait. The psychological impact on the Germans cannot be overstated. Rumors began to spread in the Wehrmacht mess halls. They are criminals sent to die. They are Mongolian warrior women. They have been given a serum that removes their fear. The German soldiers started calling them Nachthexen. The sound of the wind on the struts reminded them of a witch's broom. The Luftwaffe High Command finally issued a decree that proved how effective these women were. Any German pilot who shoots down a night witch will automatically be awarded the Iron Cross. The Iron Cross, a medal usually reserved for extreme acts of heroism, offered for shooting down a slow plywood biplane. Why? Because the PO-2 was actually hard to shoot down. Remember the speed difference? The German fighters were too fast. If a Messerschmitt tried to slow down to 90 miles per hour to line up a shot, it would stall and crash. So the German pilots had to dive, fire a split-second burst, and zoom away before they hit the witch. The witches knew this. They flew at treetop level. They hid in ravines. They forced the German aces to play a game of cat and mouse in the dark. By 1945, the 588th had flown over 24,000 combat sorties. They had dropped 3,000 tons of bombs. They had produced 23 heroes of the Soviet Union. They had flown from the steppes of Russia all the way to the gates of Berlin. And they did it while facing sexism from their own side. But they had earned the ultimate respect. The male regiments now saluted them first. But as the war ended, the final tragedy awaited. Moscow, the victory parade, the most important event in Soviet history. Every unit that fought was invited to march. The tanks rolled by, the infantry marched. But the 588th Regiment was missing. Stalin and the generals decided that the PO-2 plane was too ugly to be shown. They decided that the women, with their worn-out uniforms and tired faces, did not fit the image of the glamorous Soviet victor. They were told to go home. The war is over, girls. Go get married, have babies, forget the flying. The regiment was disbanded. The planes were scrapped. History tried to erase them. For decades, their story was kept in the shadows, overshadowed by the big tank battles and the male generals. But you cannot erase a legend. The survivors kept in touch. They met every year on the steps of the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow. They didn't talk about the politics. They talked about the cold. They talked about the fear. They talked about the sisters they left in the burning wreckage on the Blue Line. Nadezhda Popova, one of the most famous aces, lived to 91. When asked if she was afraid, she said, "I looked out at the burning plains and I saw my friends, but I also saw the Germans, and I knew that if I didn't drop that bomb, they would kill more of my people. Fear was a luxury we could not afford. The war is long over. The trenches are filled with dirt. The PO-2s have rotted away. But on a quiet night in Russia, when the wind blows just right through the birch trees, you can still hear it. A soft whistling sound. A reminder that courage isn't about the size of your gun or the speed of your plane. It's about the will to fly into the darkness, armed with nothing but wood, canvas, and an unbreakable spirit." This was the story of the Night Witches, the women who taught the world that the most dangerous thing in the sky isn't a machine. It's a human being with nothing left to lose.
If this story inspired you, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel for more history that has been hidden in the shadows. Until next time, stay hidden.